Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, comparing the cycles. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So we've spoken a lot about Ethereum even recently. We discussed the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. And despite many claims that it's going to head higher, we've talked about how it's likely just going to continue to see one lower high after another, at least during this stage of the market cycle. Now, with that in mind, I wanted to take a quick look here at ETH/USD and talk about how cyclically it's coming up to the same point, at least measured last cycle, in terms of measurements of days from the peak, where it actually started to roll back over and go back down the other way. Now, there has been some divergence, of course, on this, on this market cycle ROI chart from the peak. You can see that Ethereum followed the sort of 2018 fairly closely up until about June. And since then, it has diverged some. Now, whether we want to rationalize that by saying that a lot of this supply was locked up doesn't really matter. It has gone up. With that said, you should note that the turning point for ETH/USD last cycle, before going back down into its final slump before a true bull market, occurred at day 529. We're currently at day 518. We've talked extensively about how, the year after the primary bear market years, we had 2014, 2018, and 2022 for Bitcoin. You get your recovery years where you spend about half the year going up, half the year going down. I do think we are coming up, here relatively soon on sort of the downward part of the recovery year. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this point here, sort of the point where it finally started to roll over as measured from the peak last cycle, was only another couple weeks from now or so, which I guess would get you pretty close to the end of April. But one thing I wanted to remind people of, and this sort of goes back to the last video where we talked about the general deterioration of Ether Bitcoin, right? With the idea of just putting in lower high after lower high after lower high. And you might argue, well, what about Bitcoin? Well, take a look at this. This is an interesting way to look at year-to-date ROI during recovery years. If you look at Bitcoin and you take a look at 2019, you'll notice that it went up and then it came back down, but it actually ended the year up above where it started. Okay, now if you were to flip this over to Ethereum, what you'll notice in 2019 is that despite the fact that Bitcoin did that, right? Despite the fact that Bitcoin went up 4x and then faded that move in the latter half of the year, Ethereum, but still was above where it started the year. Ethereum ended the year below where it started the year. So that's an important distinction, I think, to make. Bitcoin did not, and Ethereum did. Now imagine if Bitcoin goes back to where it started the year. What would that do to ETH/USD? So the point I'm trying to make is that the recovery years can still be brutal for the altcoin market in general. And so when we think about looking at the period, the sort of the phase of the year where we go up, the phase of the year where we go down, we must remember that Bitcoin tends to outperform a majority of the altcoin market during the recovery year. I don't really consider ETH an alt, but just if you were trying to think about it in terms of how will the altcoin market in general perform with respect to Bitcoin, the altcoin market can still very much go down even when Bitcoin goes down, and it can go quicker to the downside than Bitcoin. So this is just something I think that people should think about when sort of thinking about how will Ethereum likely perform in the latter half of the year. My guess is that you're going to see another move back to the downside before you get a sustained move to the upside. The reality is I don't really see a sustained move to new highs coming until we get back to a period of QE. And until we get back to that point, I do think these moves will eventually be faded. I know it's quite volatile. We've been back and forth between 1,000 and 2,000 quite a bit here over the last half year or so. But it is important to remember that for the altcoin market during the recovery year for Bitcoin, the hype can die down a lot quicker than it did for Bitcoin. And you're also seeing that reflected as the dominance of Bitcoin continues to slowly push higher. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and remember to check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Thank you for tuning in, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.